Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to week 5. I can't believe it's week 5 already, but we're here. And just like always, we have a great host of panelists and chat moderators. So we're going to get right into it because I feel like this week we have quite a bit to talk about. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and have everybody introduce themselves. And I'm just going to go with what I see on my screen. So we're going to start with Dr. Cropper. Before you go, Dr. Cropper, everybody, remember that we have a whole community of learners, both people that are vets and people that are new and they want to hear a wide range of experiences. So feel free to tell them a little bit about you and also a little bit about what your current role is, whether you're aspiring or already in the industry. All right, Dr. Cropper, you're on.
Yes, I'm Dr. Max Cropper, and I have more than 40 years of experience, but I keep learning new things, and this is a great opportunity. I'm actually in eastern Utah. Uh, Spent much of my career in Utah, but did spend 6 years in the Washington, D.C. and Virginia area doing government and military contract training and development. I also have a background in evaluation, and I teach best practice instructional strategies, best practice performance improvement, lean performance improvement, and leadership development uh, certification workshops.
Thank you so much for that. And everybody in the chat, let us know where you're from. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, next we're going to go to Linda.
Hey everybody, I'm Linda Rolfe. I am in Northern Virginia, a graduate many years ago of University of North Carolina. Go Heels! And I am working on my master's in instructional design at George Mason University. Currently doing some contract work with a learning platform company, helping customize their diversity, equity, and inclusion course offerings, and also as a graduate research assistant at George Mason, helping to create a new minor in ethics and artificial intelligence.
Thank you so much for that. And you guys might have known Linda as chat moderator for all of these weeks. Linda is on the panel, so I'm super excited. All right, Sarah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah. My background is in linguistics and languages. Um, I work as a ESL teacher slash tutor. I'm also a current doctoral student in applied linguistics. But right now I'm living in North Carolina and working remotely, and I'm an aspiring instructional designer.
So great to have you, Sarah. All right, and Candice.
Hello, everyone. My name is Candice. I'm from Florida. I am my current position is an education training specialist in higher ed. I actually work with Nicole. So we're currently working on a project together so I can get more insight in her world as an ID. And also an inspiring ID myself. So I'm happy to be here today.
So glad to have Candice. That's a special treat for me as well. Thank you for being here. All right, Dixon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Morande Dixon. I'm based in Kenya, Nairobi, and currently practicing ID. I'm fairly new into the space. Currently work with a startup in their customer education department. Happy to always be here.
Dixon, I'm so happy for the commitment. I know the time difference is quite a difference. And with that, I want to shout out everyone that's tuning in internationally. We've had people from Canada, from Australia. I mean, that's 12 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock. And I want to shout out Tanya. I have not shouted out Tanya, who faithfully comes here. And that is 4 o'clock in the morning for Tanya. And also we've had Indonesia. So this has just been a great experience. You guys give some love to Tanya in the chat. All right, Sylvia.
Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm Sylvia McCoy. I am a newbie to instructional design, but I am not new to the process. I have served as a classroom teacher, I'm an instructional coach, some training specialist positions in K through 12 education, but I'm super excited to be here. I love the rich discussions and conversations that happen every Saturday. So I'm just grateful to be involved.
I love what you said. You're new to instructional design, but not new to the process. I think that's really important for all aspiring IDs to recognize that value within yourself. Awesome. All right. And Zoe, go ahead.
All right. Hey, everybody. You hear me okay? Rad. Okay. I had technical difficulties, so I joined late. Hi, everyone. I have been an instructional designer for about 5 years now. I've worked in a couple of different national companies. I love the industry. I'm hailing from Phoenix, Arizona, so it's 9 a.m. over here. Um, yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, I guess my last intro, I also mentioned I am ADHD, which really helps me think about like how to keep learners' attention and like how to focus on things because I do not naturally do that. So like having that empathy with my learners of like if I'm 3 slides in and I'm bored, my learners are also bored.
Zoe, I appreciate that insight and having you consistently on the panel, just participating, moderating, because I think we can sometimes in theory say, hey, this is what I believe and what I know. But sometimes in practice, it's so easy to kind of put it on the back burner, but it's so important to be front and center. So thank you guys for introducing yourselves. So now our chat moderators are going to hop off of Restream and they're going to go ahead and go to LinkedIn so that they can be with you in real time. Bye, everyone. All right. And with that, we're going to get right into it with our first discussion. Now, I don't know about you all, but I totally felt like we could have had an entire Saturday just for chapter 10 alone. So somehow we're going to have to navigate this, and we will. All right. So, like it always is, there's several questions there, but we're not going to go over them in succession. The chat moderators and the panelists will choose which ones you really want to hone in on. All right. So, first question is, other than formal training, where else does learning happen in the workplace? What does this look like in your own jobs? So even if you're not an ID, you still see informal learning, right? So you can still fully answer this question. Number two, how do we center and even design for learning that's informal or social? What are the true benefits? I think what I'm really trying to maybe get at for number two is some people may say, I don't have a framework for informal learning. How do I even have a framework for it? So can we even design that for them? So that's what that one is really kind of getting at. And then number three, how could we leverage the informal and social learning that takes place naturally and tie it to formal learning? So go ahead and take a stab at any of those that you guys wish. Again, we are all people that are educators in our own right. So wait time is okay. You don't feel like you have to jump into the empty space. So if there's 30 seconds of silence, it's cool. I'm sure that our participants can type it away while we think.
So, one of my thoughts is coaching is so important, and it's kind of formal, kind of usually it's informal, right? But there's a 70-20-10 rule, learning or also for leadership, and 10% is a formal events, 20% is coaching and informal learning, I think, and then 70% is doing things on the job. But I think that informal learning, there's so many sources for the informal learning. It's a little bit trickier, you know, uh, in a virtual environment because you don't have your colleagues sitting next to you. But you can still, you can have meeting, say, hey, can we meet? Or you can have meetings or individual or group meetings. And then, of course, there's so many resources where you can go for expertise. But it's interesting to try to reflect, well, how do I use informal learning? And I'm not totally sure. I probably have to reflect some more on, what I do for my informal learning.
Yeah, I really think that that's an important point that virtual environments kind of make it harder to really keep the informal piece, right? But one of the things that Julie talks about in her book, there's this kind of distinction or even kind of a collaboration of like informal and social learning, right? So though the formal piece may be a little tricky, but the social learning maybe, I think about me because even though I am an ID, I am 11 months in, or actually about to be a year. Oh my goodness. And one of the things that happened at my job, so we use Microsoft Teams a lot. And I was assigned a buddy in my onboarding, and it's the person that's in the cubicle next to me. So obviously that's an in-person interaction, but we're hybrid. So a lot of times it is virtual. And one of the things that we use, just from a technical piece, is the chat. That is the person that I get to ask and all of my questions to, like, to the minute. So it's a lot of times it is virtual because she works from home a lot of the times, but that's a piece that is continuous. So I like what you bring up, Dr. Cropper, because I think one of the things we have to think about as designers is how do we curate that learning in a new environment, right? So I think that that's so important that you brought that up. Anybody else?
Um,
Yeah, I think that there is so much learning that happens um, just naturally as we go about our lives. And if we can leverage that, it can almost be a process of collecting it. I mean, when we go on Twitter or um, some of the links we follow when we open up our browser can be learning. Some are just distractions, but some can be learning. Um, I do a lot of learning throughout my day just because I'm just naturally curious. And if there's a way to tap into helping others see that that is learning and helping curate it or collect it somewhere, like she talks about creating the wiki spaces and the um, not a database, but somewhere where the users are continually adding to it and editing it on their own and updating it. Um, I wish there were, or I would love if there's other ideas about how to help people see that as learning.
um, in my graduate organization, the Graduate Students of Language at Temple University, we often have a lot of turnover because people graduate, and often the person coming in a new position on our e-board doesn't know what to do. Even for like navigating the systems in place at the university, like paperwork, setting up our annual conference. And so often we rely on our peers to help us navigate you know all the different procedures we have to go through, or what's the best way of like approaching something. So we often say, hey, does someone know who was in this position last year? Or I know so and so did this position before. Let me reach out to them. And even if we use a formal mode of communication, now that most of us are working virtually, we can still use, for example, Zoom as a medium, text message as a medium, email as a medium, to have those kind of social slash informal interactions where we're just asking for advice.
Yeah, and I really appreciate hearing the different real world examples, because I think then from those examples we can say, okay, how can we design for it? Because you brought up a great point, Linda. Like, I wish we knew, we had more kind of guidance, right, on how to create those things. I think a lot of that starts with how we think about our own jobs. And feel free to disagree with me, but I've been mulling over this, right? Like in our own jobs, like a lot of times we talk about stakeholders and managers not understanding like more creative forms of training. But I also think sometimes it's hard for us as designers to come out of the box, right? I think there are moments where we ourselves are thinking like, is this actually good training? Or wait, is it actually training if I don't have a module? Like I think some of us would feel somewhat uncomfortable presenting an informal social plan if we know that that's the best thing. And so I think in some cases we already know training is not always, like, a formal training is not always the best solution. But how do we get out of our own heads sometimes of being like, actually, in this situation, social and informal actually is the primary solution here. But I think it's hard for us to wrap our own heads around not always delivering the traditional thing, all the time. What do you guys think about that?
I certainly agree with you on that, Nicole. I think once you look at all these diverse ways in which you can be able to deliver learning, then it allows for people to really take, whatever that they're comfortable with, and allow that ability to digest that information. I remember recently I was working on a module on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this was a very new topic to me, very, very new. And I was trying to read books that I was given and articles. I was like, no, this is not making sense to me. Until I stopped and I started listening to podcasts that were engaging experts in that particular field. And from those discussions, you sort of get to be able to have an expanded sort of understanding of what it is. And now it made it easier when now you go back and try to curate the content from now the material you're provided with. I think opening those avenues and also allowing those rooms for discussion, you'll usually get some nuanced information that normally will be difficult to find. And I really like what Coursera is doing currently with their modules, where they actually force you to be part of a discussion, so that you can actually complete a module. That essentially means you still can leverage the people within the community to learn from each other, which is really fascinating.
Absolutely. There is a learning management system, and I promise this isn't a sponsored video, but Novo Ed. I was beginning one of their, yeah, Dixon, you know them. I was beginning one of their learning experience design courses. And what I really thought was amazing, kind of what you're talking about with Coursera, the social aspect was already built in. And it kind of, not exactly like social media, but I would take purposeful social media. Like in between each module, there was a community discussion and you could comment on other people. And in some cases, you had to comment in order to move on, or even to like personalize, like who are the community that you're learning with. So many times you're just there in front of a training and you're like, oh my gosh, this is boring, this is a lot of information. But there was an opportunity to create your profile. You could either have written about yourself, you could have done a voice note about yourself and your interest, or actually done a video. And that's how you started it. So even building community in that, it was a formalized training, because Julie talks about kind of mixing formal training and informal training. And when I had that experience, I was like, how amazing is this? Because it's a normal LMS, but it has those social aspects built in, which really help to increase motivation, because you're like, oh, I want to see what so and so said about my thing that I submitted. And that was very, very, like you said, fascinating. It was very brilliant to see them kind of merge old ways of doing things with new ideas. I want to take some time to kind of go and look at some comments that we have from our community. So Reba says some organizations work at collaborating skills weekly and bi-weekly by having fun or informal activities using tasks or tools. Co-workers work as buddies or teams to complete the task while learning. Absolutely. In Julie's book, she had the hero example, right? And how there was some aspects of his job that he wasn't able to just learn by formal training, right? Some aspects of his job, they came and had like lunch chats, right? For people to say, here's what I learned from my experience, here's what I would have done better. So that's perfect. Any other thoughts from the panel? It could be any one of these questions, 1, 2, or 3.
Well, I find that every person that I meet with, I was meeting with Martin Wanjohi, and you sponsored a discussion with him, and he's developing a course on needs analysis. And I shared with him my lean performance improvement model, and then he was able to expand it to a more complete model. And then yesterday I was meeting with uh, Scott Wersing, when we're co-presenters at ISPI and ATD, and I was talking about this needs analysis model, and he says, "Oh, by the way, I've worked. I know this expert on needs analysis, and so I'm hoping to get some more information about that person, that does this full time." But yeah, you never really know. You bring up a topic, and you never know what expertise you're going to find that's going to help you.
Absolutely. And I also want to take the time Accessibility is super important to us. Our chat moderators are going to be putting a link to a web captioner tool that you can use. There is a technical glitch with the streaming service that we use, so that's why there's not automatic captions. I am not happy about that because I know how important accessibility is. We have people from all sorts of have all sorts of learning needs in different languages and all sorts of reasons why captions are crucial. So I want to apologize for the fact that we don't have auto captions this week, but there is a tool called Web Captioner. It's a free tool that our chat moderators will be putting in the link periodically throughout. If you had a hard time following any of this, what I'm going to do, you contact me and I will give you an edited version that does have captions. So thank you guys for pointing that out. And I do want to apologize for that again. Hopefully by next week that will be fixed. But yes, I really thought that was a really important point, especially the collaboration piece, because even with your example, Dr. Cropper, you get to see it in real time build upon itself, right? And I think that's the piece that we miss a lot of times when people are training all the time in isolation or without any follow-up. Sometimes it's like we're thinking, is it the training? Is that the problem? And sometimes it could be an amazing training, but all of the other aspects that are natural to us in our human processes doesn't get to actually shine at the forefront. All right. Anybody else on the panel? Then I'm going to go back to our audience. We have some great thoughts this week.
Yeah, I wanted, when I was going through this chapter on social learning, I was just thinking of how, I don't know if this is the same in the countries where you guys come from, but in Kenya specifically, little kids who are slightly older are supposed to take care of their younger siblings, and how this literally happens is by the mom just assigning that responsibility. And I usually think of when I'm thinking of social learning, I see kids becoming more like monkey see monkey do, whereby whatever the parents do, they easily can model that. And for kids, especially in rural Kenya, you'll easily find them, the kid is the one who goes to fetch water, for example, and it's like an easy task of you show them where to get the water, and it becomes consistently by them doing it themselves. And eventually the mom will graduate the child gradually to other tasks. So if the mom is going to farm, and the next time she's going to carry the kid, and she'll show her the first time, then she'll just let her move along with it. So I usually look at social learning as how we bring up kids, and it's usually quite, it's something we don't know that it is social learning, but how I see it. And when I was reading this, I was like, actually, this is what really easily happens to kids. And like, they watch what parents are doing, and they just model that.
I love that because I keep thinking about human-centered design, and I know it's more complicated than what I'm saying, with all the theories, and it's more complex. But the reason why I love that example, Dixon, is because a lot of us already have a built-in sense of what makes good learning. And somehow through our structures and our organizations, we forget that, right? And really there's all of these basics, and that's what I love about this book. It goes back to the very basic human instincts that actually help drive learning home. I'm going to go back to our audience because this week you all are not quiet and I love it. All right. So Tanya Lake says that there was a 3-hour training at a sit and get. It was supposed to be a sit and get in their job yesterday. It was incredibly boring and ineffective. Zero social interaction, which was a missed opportunity. I totally agree with that. Anybody on the panel have ever had that experience or have anything to say about the zero social interaction being a missed opportunity?
Yeah, sometimes even as a teaching assistant at a university, we have to undergo some training. Often that training is, individual, like you can just go on the LinkedIn Learning and take a course. But sometimes we have courses facilitated by the university. And I think in general, they do a good job of interaction. But sometimes I felt with some of those trainings, they were just trying to throw information at us. And they weren't drawing on the expertise that all the educators in the audience already had. And that was definitely a missed opportunity.
So, Sarah, I think you honed in on something really important. They weren't drawing from all the expertise, right? That was already there. And Julie talks about this, and I think a lot of us believe this is letting, like, respecting the learner, right? That they're already smart, right? Not insulting them. They're already smart. They can already contribute. A lot of times, informal and social learning is that learning by doing piece that we talk about. Like if the learners don't actually do something with the knowledge, then it's just for what? I mean, it's a workplace training for goodness sakes, right? And so when you don't actually leverage what you already have, then the doing piece gets missed. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, and I focus on task centered instruction based on M. David Merrill's first principles of instruction. But ultimately, it's task centered learning, and the learners need to be able to do something, perform something, and the training should help them do that. Whether it's former, formal or informal, they need to learn so that they can perform intelligently, real world tasks. And and most instructional models leave out the learner. And fortunately, at least, this this talks about informal learning, because the learner is the performer and ultimately has to own the learning and the performance.
Absolutely. And you said that several times over the past few weeks, Dr. Cropper, and it's really stuck with me. Having them own the learning. I feel like that's what it all comes down to, right? Owning the learning. All right, guys. So we're almost ready to move on. Is there any other thoughts on this? And I'm also going to go back to the audience as well. It could be question 1, 2, or 3, or just general thoughts about social and informal training.
I really love Dixon's comparison to raising kids and creating that culture of a family or childhood. Um, and there's a lot of, I think, loving to make a distinction between adult learning and childhood learning, andragogy and pedagogy. And I don't think there's fundamentally that much difference. The kinds of things adults need to learn are different than the kinds of things kids need to learn, but the way it happens, I think, is the same. And I think we really miss a lot by trying to make that distinction. Um, Kids need to learn how to live, how to grow up, how to be in a group of people. And they do it by being in a group of people and by watching other people be in a group of people. And I read somebody this week in discussion of Knoll's theories of adult learning andragogy, said that we take our American system of education takes that natural curiosity, that natural inclination to learn and to grow, and we educate it out of them in our American school system with the, butts in seats, my information going into your head. There's a lot of good education that doesn't happen that way, but in general, when that's generally how it proceeds, K through 12, and when that model is then inserted into a corporate environment, we get the same kind of tunnel vision, not actual learning. And if we can just step back, I think, and remember what was fun about learning growing up and how it happened naturally, just by being in the context that we need to learn about.
Absolutely. I think it's so important too, because I think, every week, one of the things people have really loved about our discussions is kind of how practical it is and how you can walk away with, like, oh, I can create this new thing right now. And right now, we're having kind of more of a philosophical, sociological conversation. And some people may be like, oh man, I came here to learn this technique that I can walk away with and on Monday put it in my project. But if we don't have our own philosophy, right, of design, then we won't actually get to the application part. So I think this is such a crucial conversation because how we design is directly based on what we believe about learners and what we believe about the design. There's a quote here on the screen from Erin, says a friend once told her, learn, and the word earn it has the word earn in it. You have to earn your learning, right? So you have to actually help the learners be invested into it. And it's also about trusting that they will get there. I think that that is really crucial for us as designers, because I think sometimes we pull back like, oh, I want them to do this task, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. And it's like, do we believe that we're designing for competent people? They can do it, you know? And I think that that's really important for us to kind of keep in mind. I'm going to go ahead and read some of these. There's some good questions as well. So there's a lot in the chat, guys. So if you don't get to everyone, please know that you're still a part of the community and we're seeing all of them. Zoe had this is from Zoe. There's pressure from leadership to show a certain return on investment too. So often we feel like we have to create materials instead of relying on social informal. Absolutely. Let's see. There's more. I put that one on the screen. Okay, there's a question. When you have a culture of not integrating social or informal learning, how might someone change that organization wide from the bottom up? Asking this one ed tech specialist from their school and someone who knows the learning science of social learning. So this is someone who knows the science of it, but they're like, organizationally, if that's not what people value, how do you have them value that? So any thoughts on that? How do you change culture to see social and informal learning as something that's important?
Well, I think you can form informal groups. Sometimes you need like lunch and learns, or you need uh, just meetings to discuss issues and get help. I think you can formalize. If you set up a chat space, where you get some good ideas and comments. You know, uh, somebody mentioned that some of the chat, the chat spaces are not very valuable, but make sure that you have significant comments and ideas. But yeah, that's uh, it's interesting to formally set up informal environments, but you can help do that, and just putting people next to each other, or I guess with virtually with Microsoft Teams, that sort of thing makes it possible.
I'd like to also piggyback on this. One way is to get buy-in from other people that you trust or who you know are on the same page as you, because then you can start forming a group of people. And then once you have like that core group, that can expand.
That's really important too, to have those people that could even kind of formulate something already. Because sometimes people just need to see it in action, right? They need to just say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but like you talked about that pressure for return on investment. Sometimes it's just about having it happen and then it gets presented, right? So I think that that's really important. Dixon, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you look like your wheels are turning. Did you have something to add before you move on to chapter 11?
I think both comments that have been shared are quite accurate. The other thing maybe I'll add on to will be having a clear objective as to why this group is being formed, and I think like what Mr. Cropper said, Dr. Cropper, sorry, said, it allows for having a direction in terms of the conversation going to happen. I mean, look at what we have. We basically know we are coming every other weekend to discuss how to design for how people learn. There is a clear objective towards what you're trying to do, and I think adding that into the group will also give everyone else a sense of, okay, this group is meant for this, and I think we might need it. So I think that's another thing that we might want to add.
Absolutely. Guys, I don't know about you all. Maybe someone else is like, "Oh, let's get to 11." I like want to stay here for the next 30 minutes and then just add on a sixth week or a seventh week. But I know that we have to move on, and we have great chat moderators. You guys can't see it, but they're keeping us on time, and they're like, hey, it's time to move. So we're going to move. But this is a conversation that we all have to revisit at some point because it's super important.
So
All
Nicole,
right.
one
Yes.
more comment. I'm just wondering how we can be better at this social learning.
Absolutely. And you're right, Dr. Cropper, and be better at it and make sure that it actually is learning, right? That it actually is learning. Does anybody want to tackle that? How do you all think we can be better at social learning? That's something we want to mull over? Oh, go ahead.
One thing that I can say, first of all, is by practicing and learning from it. And I think once you try and set up something, then you see, what are the outcomes, and you try to learn and improve on it. That I think will be one way in which you can be better, and having that curiosity to just give it a try.
Absolutely. Basically, what you're talking about, Dixon, is the evaluation piece, right? Actually making sure continuously evaluate and is the learning happening. Kanikwa said something that I thought was really interesting. I know we're over time for our amazing chat moderators who are timekeepers, but I'm wondering, in some cultures, they might say they don't value informal learning, but can this person look for places it's already happening, water cooler conversations, and start to point out the value of those, right? So it's already happening all around. So if you start with what people are already familiar with, I think that's really great. Okay, we got to move on. I knew this was going to happen. All right. So just a reminder to the community, our chat moderators are going to put up the email so that you can be one of the first people to know when this event sign up goes live. As you know, the author, Julie Dirksen, will be with us next week. I am excited, and for full disclosure, also very nervous. But Julie will be with us next week. And so our chat moderators are going to put in the link. If you already signed up for that email link last week, you do not have to put your email in there again. This is just for people who didn't get that link. So we're very excited that Julie will be with us next week. All right, so I am going to just put this screen up there. This is also a QR code. If we're still waiting for our chat moderators, you guys can put in your email that way. I'm not going to put up the QR code that long because I know our chat moderators are great and I see that they are on it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move to chapter 11. All right, so this question we're not going to stay on very long, but I kind of wanted to think about this quote. It was Julie quoting someone else, actually, and then we're going to move on to other ones. So we're not going to spend much time here. Julie was talking about Dave Ferguson, and Julie says, job aids can act as training wheels. Oh, wait, whoa, Nicole. What was chapter 11 about for those who are just joining us? Okay, so chapter 11 was about designing for the environment. One of the things that we know is that sometimes it's not a training issue, it's not a lack of knowledge issue. Sometimes environmentally, maybe where people work is too small, or they don't have the right technology they need to complete their task, or whatever, like things that are outside of not having the knowledge. Sometimes there's environmental issues that are barriers to workplace learning. So that's what chapter 11 is about, everyone. And it says, job aids can act as training wheels, which Dave Ferguson describes as something to guide the novice so that they can produce results similar to those of an expert without having to internalize all the knowledge the expert has. Just to kind of recap, all right. So Dave Ferguson says all those job aids or those guys that we create, it can help someone that's new on the job kind of perform at a higher level without having to learn every single thing that an expert has learned on the job over time. So the question that I have is, how do we shift our thinking, us as designers, organizational development people, coaches, how do we shift our thinking to design for environment and understand that the goal of every training isn't to get the learner to master every component when there's environmental barriers. Let me reframe that in case there's a lot there. As designers, right? We often think like we are doing a good job if if every single aspect of this task is covered, right? But there's some tasks where it's just too gargantuan, it's too big. So, what can we do to say, all right, the job here is not to give them every single piece of information, but just what we need? How do we do that?
So when I think about this question, the first thing I think about is signage. Think about taking a trip and you want to get from point A to point B. Maybe you've never driven, like, for example, if you're driving, maybe you've never driven that route before. Maybe you're going to a completely new place. The one thing that helps keep you focused and inches you towards getting to point B are the signs that you see on the road. Or maybe you have Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, some kind of map program or a physical map that shows you, which way you need to go. You have that path kind of outlined for you. Or you have like a navigator saying, okay, turn right here. Keep going straight for this number of miles. You just need those steps kind of outlined for you. You don't actually need to remember all of those steps. You just need to get to point B. And so in a workplace environment, signs can help us, remember exactly what we need to do when we get to a certain point.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Thank you for that, Sarah. I just love the correlation that you made because again, it's something we all are familiar with.
Yeah, I think that anytime a job aid or a performance aid will help with performance, I think that's a great idea. But I really like towards the end of the chapter, and Julie talked about improving the process. And so, if you have a bad process, no matter if no matter if training and performance aids are going to help, unless the idea is let's make the process more efficient, more effective. Uh, let's look at other factors. Hiring the right people. People with uh, proactivity and character, uh, with competence and helping build their competence. Providing the necessary enabling resources. Aligning all their efforts to the business outcomes. Uh, Providing evaluation, and feedback and incentives and consequences and good leadership and good teamwork and having a good culture. You know, looking at all the factors that can influence performance makes such a big difference. And then, but yeah, have the job aids, have the performance aids. So people can do the job better and faster and more completely.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually a good segue to the rest of our chapter 11 questions. For those who are completely new to instructional design, I try to be mindful that we have all sorts of levels here. One of the things that you may or may not have encountered in your studying or watching things is that sometimes at the end of the analysis phase of the ADDIE process, ADDIE, for those who are completely new and you want to look into that, there's analysis that is supposed to take place for quite a bit of time before you even start designing training. And what we learn is sometimes at the end of that analysis phase, the recommendation to your client is, oh, you don't need training at all, right? And I don't think that I'm going to switch to the next slide now. I don't think a lot of times we recognize how important that part of our job is. When we get to the point where it's like, oh, you don't need training, that doesn't mean that we failed or, man, I don't get a job. That actually speaks to your ability, the absence of a learning solution or the absence of a training. You making that judgment call actually speaks to your ability to realize what people need, and at the end of that, so sometimes our job is just as important when what we have to say to the client is, you don't need training. That's actually a sign of good instructional design, learning and development, just as much as putting out a good training. So here are the additional questions for chapter 11. As per the usual, our audience members, our panelists, our moderators, you can speak to all of those or just one of them or a combination or whatever you feel. Okay, so it says, what are the ways to put knowledge into the environment? Sarah kind of talked about this, like with signs. But even if it's not a sign, what else? Like where people are passing it and seeing it. With number one, that idea of putting knowledge into the environment, I think about my own work. On Friday, I left 7 post-it notes on my computer, okay, with things that I learned that week, things I need to get back to. We already naturally put knowledge into the environment for ourselves. So as designers, what are the ways you could use the sign, but even outside of a sign, that we could put knowledge into the environment that people can continuously revisit? Number two, do we as an industry have a framework for this? Are there people that you've listened to that have talked about this at your own workplace? Are you already putting knowledge into the environment, things that people can see or feel or touch or hear continuously and quickly reference? Number three, how is this perceived as an effective strategy? What I mean by that question is, um, do you feel like there's like resistance towards kind of designing for the environment, and instead of a training, instead of an aid, it's that? Four, how can we operationalize this idea more of designing for the environment? All right, and then number five is the one I actually, to me, out of all of these questions, number five to me is the one where I really want to see us go and talk about. This chapter emphasizes that as learning and development people, L&D people, our job is much more than just designing training. How can we sharpen our skills? Because we tend to only focus on skills having to do with learning, articulate storyline, or articulate storyline, or designing it this way. But one of the skills that we all need to sharpen is, hey, I can analyze this environment, this business need, right? And I could say there's no training, but you need to, like you said, Dr. Cropper, hire better people. They need better access to better software. The way this office looks is actually why they can't get motivated to whatever. Like, how can we sharpen our skills and be better at the analysis phase to help organizations say, oh, we actually don't need training at all? So that's a lot. Take some time, mull over it, and chime in however you see fit.
One of
So,
my favorite
go ahead.
courses. You want to go ahead, Dixon?
No, go ahead, Linda.
One of my favorite courses so far in my master's program has been was a 2-course sequence of user experience design. And it involved a lot of user experience research, and the theory of getting into the environment, seeing, well, first of all, identifying what needs to change and why it's not happening. And I think we've in the past talked about Kathy Moore's mapping strategy for figuring that out. What is it that's not happening? What needs to happen instead? And why is that not happening? And then the user experience research helps us to understand that environment and see where that knowledge can be embedded, or if that's even what needs to happen. But we have to understand the environment. We have to understand what is happening, where, and why, in order to identify whether it's learning that is the solution to the change that needs to happen or not. Are the burgers not being assembled correctly because the pickles are over here instead of with the other things, and we just need to put the pickles in the right sequence with everything else? Or is it because people don't know that they need to put pickles in? And you can only really know that by observing how the work is happening, and sometimes doing things like think alouds, I think is what they're called, in more, I guess, mental tasks, having a user verbalize what they're doing and what they're thinking as they click through this website. And what are they trying to find when they go here? What are they expecting when they go there? And what are they not finding? Um, I think we have to be really familiar with the environment in order to design for it.
Linda, let's just live there. First of all, I just want to say, Linda, I think the name of your first instructional design book is going to be called Burgers and Pickles. I don't need any royalties from it. I just want you to like host a book club when you release that. And I really love that. Like the burger is not being assembled. Either they don't know they're supposed to put pickles in it or the pickles are not accessible, right? I think that's so important for us to think about and to be familiar with the environment. I think one of the pitfalls that we fall into, I know I fall into it, is the content. Okay, what day is the training? Okay, and they need to learn what about this? Okay, and a lot of times it's okay, what are they doing now? Can I go over and to this office, to this organization and just watch the workers? Right? Can I just see them input this data, like this data? Like, can I watch them take these customer service phone calls before we even get into everything else? Like, that's one way. I think one of the things you answered in five is number five is we need to be people who are adamant about getting to know the environment, and even talking to our stakeholders. Like, yes, I know you want this to be out in 2 weeks, but I need to do a site visit. I need to talk to the people who are using this. And like you said, it's so similar to UX design, right? Oh, I love that so much. Does anybody else want to chime in?
So just a comment building on what Linda just said and what you said, Nicole, is if you can identify all of the major factors that that influence performance, and then do kind of a needs analysis, saying, okay, what's the ideal? What do we want to happen? What's currently happening? What are the causes? Like Linda was talking about, and then what are some recommended solutions? But the key is identifying the significant factors, because most of the times that's not done. and and Linda's idea, and also Julie talked about this, the brain, doing a brainstorm with this, with sticky notes or whatever, that is very, very effective, because then you have a better chance, especially if you're working with stakeholders, you have a better chance of identifying all of the major issues, and you can also do this with process mapping, like Linda, you were talking about. Okay, what's the ideal process? How would it work? What's currently happening? How can we eliminate the problems and the issues? And you have to be a little bit transparent. Everybody has to be kind of transparent and admit, okay, I'm probably the cause of this, But the point is if you can be, then you can identify amazing solutions and achieve amazing performance. And anyway, I really like how Julie emphasized that at the end of chapter 11, and that we're emphasizing it now.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Well, I'm going to actually chime in with an example from my own work, because even though I am an instructional designer, I'm essentially somebody who's being trained currently, right? And completely new. So the environment that I work on, I realize when I watch these lives, I'm like, oh, Nicole, you don't introduce yourself. So hi, everyone. My name is Nicole A. Harris. I'm the Learning Solutions Enthusiast, and I am an ID that works in a higher ed institution, but I work in a more corporate space because I work in HR. So I don't design trainings for the professors and students that go to this higher ed institution. I deliver trainings for staff, even more than faculty. So your soft and your hard skills, either how to use this new system or email effectiveness and business communication. So it's more corporate. But here's the caveat is in most situations, if you're in a corporate environment, your SMEs, for those who are completely new, your subject matter experts, those who you interviewed to design the training, usually your SMEs don't double as your clients, right? Usually you're an instructional design place. This grocery store wants their workers to be better in some way. The grocery store comes to the firm and says, hey, we need training on this particular aspect. And you, as a instructional design firm, you analyze, you see, you do all those things. You seek out subject matter experts in the grocery design, the grocery industry, and you say, tell me about this A, B, and C. And then you get that information, design training, and you work back and forth. Now, that's an overly simplified process, right? But where I work in my space, a lot of times our clients, those who are asking us to build training, are also our subject matter experts a lot of the time. And a lot of times, to make it even more complicated, our subject matter experts also help to deliver training sometimes. So it's very different than what you usually see in instructional design. And so for me, as a person who's being trained, so right now, I'm not speaking as someone who's talking about advice or what you can do better. I'm talking about someone who's had to have good training myself. Sometimes when I was designing training, I was getting so confused. So this is a performance issue on my end. Okay. So I'm talking about me as the learner. I was like, I would design training and I would get so frustrated because I was just like, it's too much information and I don't know how to put it together. And designing trainings, even though it would be successful somehow at the end, it was a grueling process. And I was like, I love where I work. I love my coworkers, but I can't keep going through this like crisis in the middle of every training that I go through. And then it finally hit me environmentally. What was happening in my environment was because we work so closely with our SMEs and our SMEs actually know my coworkers already go into projects knowing the jargon, they know the information. So they don't have to interview the SME as if they've just met them. That's a usual process that we do in instructional design. Usually, we don't know anything about the subject at all. We interview them and then we design their training. I was designing training from not knowing anything, but nobody thought about environmentally that, oh, Nicole doesn't know any of these professors or these people. Like everyone else has a 10-year relationship with them. So they don't need to ask them what this means. And they can go right and create this training really fast. I was struggling because I'm new here. And so thankfully, because my boss values learning and values a really good onboarding process, I said to her, I said, I just did a SME interview the other day. I didn't ask anyone. I just was tired of struggling. And then my boss was like, oh my gosh, Nicole, I'm so happy you brought that up. Because we're all so used to our SMEs and we know them, I didn't think about the fact that you have a formal ID training background and you would want to do this process. And I think it would actually be helpful. So we have a Friday community of practice meeting. That's our social learning. And she was like, can you present the SME interview process that you did? And I presented it to others, and they were like, oh, yeah, that actually would help me. Even though I have been here a long time, a lot of times in the middle is when I get clarity of what the information is. So in my workplace, I was able to help them with the environmental process. Like, yeah, I'm going to always struggle with my performance if I don't get to do SME interviews. Anyone can chime in about any part of this. But wait time doesn't bother me. I'm like, oh, everyone's learning and listening.
No, I love that story. And it reminds me a lot of with ESL teaching, we're expected to do needs analysis. Um, we need to know who we're teaching, whether it's an individual student or a whole classroom. And if we don't know what they know, or what they want to know, and a lot of different details about our learners, then how can we design the lesson or the curriculum?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Dr.
Well,
Crawford, it's like your wheels are turning.
well, what's interesting is the SMEs are sometimes the managers and the decision makers. And they may be the ones you need to convince, hey, we don't really need training. These are some of the, let's ask some of these other questions, ask some of these other hard questions. Scott Wersing and I do presentations at ATD on asking the hard questions, but it's really just asking the right questions so you don't waste waste a lot of time, you know, using the coming up with the wrong solutions. But I like what you said about working with the SMEs and building the relationship with them. That's so critical, uh, because sometimes they're too busy to work with you. And so you need to build that relationship so that you can get the information you need.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Somehow it is 1 o'clock, but I don't want us to just leave. If there's any final thoughts about any of this or any big picture ideas, it doesn't have to go directly with any questions. I would love for you guys to share that now if you have any.
Yeah, this is an actual example of an environment. And I just want to add on top of what Sarah had mentioned at the start. There is a forest. It's like a park, so people can go visit, cycle, take walks. It's called Karura, and so how they've designed it is, one, you can't go inside with plastic bottles or papers, nothing like that. So what they have done is they have clear instructions at the start when you're getting in. Then on top of that, they've provided a space for you to actually store your items so that when you can come back, you can still pick them up. And when you go inside, they still have bins all over the place, just in case you forgot to and just went inside with one. What is really fascinating about how they've designed the park is it's quite big, and and people were getting lost inside. So what they did is they created signages. So if you are going for the 5 kilometer walk, for example, it was labeled blue. So you can only follow the blue track. If you are going for the 10 kilometers, you can only follow the yellow markings. And and that actually reduced the number of people who are getting lost inside the forest, which was opposite before that was done. So it's an actual example of an environment that I thought was really fascinating how they designed it.
Oh, I love those examples. Every time Dixon talks, I'm like, and I need to book my flight to Kenya now. But I really,
Welcome.
I really enjoy all of those insights. Any last words? All right. Anyone? All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and just say um, next week is going to look a little different, not in a bad way, but because we have Julie here, it's not going to be like as much discussion. So I felt like I should take the opportunity now. I didn't plan to do this. But oh no, I'm not going to get emotional. I'm talking to myself. I cannot believe what we've all been able to achieve in these 6 weeks and the community that we've built on a global scale. And I think what really makes me emotional is it's really centered on our job is really to equip people to feel confident in their vocations and their callings. That's essentially what we care about. And the fact that so many practitioners are here taking time on a Saturday to talk about the actual work that you do Monday through Friday says a lot. And I feel very changed by these 5 weeks about what capacity and community can do. And every one of you guys, whether you were a chat moderator, a panelist, or an audience member, have really inspired me that my journey that I'm almost a year in is that I've made the right choice and it's so much more than just a job. It is a calling. And it's been so great to witness those who are aspiring and those who are in the field come together around this great call. And I'm so excited for what this can do, not just for our personal careers, but even the awareness of our profession. I don't know about you all, but no one knows what an instructional designer does outside of our circle. And I think it's really important that we continue to bring this awareness so that everyone can know that there is a whole system of people that want you to be better and to feel more confident in what gives you purpose in this life. So thank you guys for being a part of this, and see you guys next week. Have a great one, everyone.
Bye.